Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 25 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, once again, thank you for those of you who have written in and posted comments to the cameraposition.com weblog, and I appreciate those comments and emails, and keep sending them. A couple of you sent some photographs or links to websites, and I love looking at what you're all up to out there. One of the reasons that I got into photography in the first place is because I love looking at photographs. So please send me what you're doing and send me some websites, and I'd love to take a look at them and put some links to some things on cameraposition.com. This week, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the portrait photographs that I made this summer, or at least a pair of portrait photographs I made on my Italian trip this summer. And to start off, I think it's probably logical to say that my interest in photographing in Italy grew over a long period of time, over a decade and a half, and primarily, at least at first, was interested in capturing sort of beautiful things in Italy, and then eventually morphed into an idea of photographing buildings or structures in Italy. And what I eventually discovered was that interest in structure really was an interest in the historical application of structure and the way in which people had modified or mediated their landscape and their structural lives in order to more accurately portray who they were and what their interests were and make things that both solved problems of keeping shelter and so forth and so on, but also did things like glorified God or did things for people in the public palaces in Italy. Those kinds of things eventually became more and more interesting to me. And the offshoot of that interest began to become people. And it began to become the hands of the people who had modified these stones that I was interested in photographing, carvers, people who had placed together brick upon brick upon brick to build a remarkable structure. And it was the hands of those people that eventually became interesting to me. And over the last couple of years, I've begun to make portrait photographs. Not something that I've ever been particularly interested in and of itself, but what I've begun to realize is that the people that are there in Italy are an awful lot of why I like traveling to the country, and their ancestors are an awful lot of why I like what I like photographing. The fact that those people who over centuries have constructed a landscape, either by constructing a farming landscape or constructing a physical building to conduct business or worship or whatever in, has been a large part of what I've been interested in. So I've begun to make photographs, and I have to say, portrait photographs, and I have to say that I've begun to make these portrait photographs rather tentatively. I made several in the summer of 2005 and didn't make nearly as many as I had hoped to in this particular summer of 2006, but I did make a few, and I wanted to concentrate on a couple of photographs today that I made and talk a little bit about where these pictures came from and ask you a question about which one you like better. This guy is 97 years old. That's one of the most interesting things I think about the photograph. A dapper looking 97-year-old man who comes to a particular cafe every day to have a cup of coffee in the middle of the afternoon, a cup of espresso coffee, and has with him a magazine and sits and reads. And just a wonderfully evocative guy, very much like what you would expect to find in an Italian hill town. This picture taken in the amazing city, and we'll look at some photographs later on in subsequent podcasts of Matera, an amazing city in the province of Basilicata in southern Italy, the Archway of the Boot, the Arch of the Boot in Italy. But in any case, the idea of this photograph, a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. One is that I am I don't know if shy is the right word, but I'm reticent, I guess is a better word, to make portrait photographs of people, partly because I don't feel like I want to invade their privacy, their space. I don't want to have them thinking that I'm considering them as objects in some way, and rather I'm interested in really getting to explore who they are, where they came from, why they're there, so forth and so on. So I had kind of a difficult time kind of getting started with the idea of making portraits. It was something that I really didn't feel like I could just come right out and say, "Hi, I'm a photographer. I want to make your photograph." And although I suppose in some ways what I've discovered is that people are in fact very interested in being photographed, it in some ways demarks them as somebody important. And I think if we think about the way we feel when someone makes a photograph of us, ultimately what that photograph means is I care about you, I think you're interesting in some way. But what I discovered was that if I just sat down in a cafe, a bar outside, as in the case of this photograph, and I took out my large format camera and just set it up on the tripod and started messing with it like I was cleaning it or doing something. Invariably, people would say, tell me, ask me some questions about the camera. Is that an old camera? Is it just like an old camera, and so forth and so on? And I have a Deerdorf 4x5 special camera, and it looks old because it's made out of wood, although I bought it new in 1982. But it has that sort of air of authentic, old-timey looking photography about it. And so the idea of the machine being an icebreaker. But the other part of the machine is that when I ask then, after talking about the camera and what I'm doing, and I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I tend to bring along a sample or two of the work that I do, and my business cards also have photographs now on them of the work that I do, and I've used several different photographs on three different business cards with three different images, so that I have some variety of work along with me all the time, so people can kind of see what I'm up to and so forth and so on. But what I've discovered is that when you point this large camera at people, they begin to loosen up in a way that is different from the way they might when you point a small format or a point and shoot kind of camera at them. And I don't really know if loosen up is really the right word either, because it's not a sense of looseness, it's a sense of importance given to the camera. And I think that people begin to understand that the camera itself is conveying the importance of the event, the idea of this large object. The fact that I explained to them, and I speak enough Italian to get by, I explained that exposures are probably going to be somewhat longer than they might be used to, and so they're going to need to hold still, and so forth and so on. So the idea of being able to have the camera take over for me in the sort of, I don't know, awkward phase of trying to get people to sit in front of the camera. And I think you can really see in this photograph of this man that there is a sense that, he really understands the importance of the event. And certainly he is, and he didn't dress specially for me, by the way. This is his normal daily dress, and it was rather cool. So he's wearing, a sweater vest and his tweed jacket and so forth and so on. And actually, the question I have for you folks who are listening is which photograph you prefer, because he was when he arrived in the cafe wearing this beautiful knit or tweed rather cap. And he asked if he should take it on or take it off or leave it on. And I said, well, let's do one of each. And so I did a few negatives of each of the ideas, of one with hat on and one with hat off. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think? Do you like it with the hat on or with the hat off? I think I've begun to develop a preference for one over the other, but I think that there is a real difference between these two photographs, and I'm kind of curious as to what you all think. The other thing that's interesting about this particular photograph, and I think it's never really going to come through here in the podcast graphics or on the cameraposition.com website where the images are also posted, but the descriptive power of the large format camera and the ability of that camera to describe things in this amazingly tactile way. The threads on the tweed jacket and the way in which his button on his pants kind of has a little glimmer to it. All of these kinds of things are really an awful lot of why I continue to be enamored with the large format 4x5-inch negative. And even though I am now scanning that film and printing the images digitally, that descriptive power really comes through. It doesn't really much matter how the print is made, whether it is made in the traditional darkroom or made on an inkjet printer from a high quality scan. What's happening with these pictures is an amazing power of description. And I think that there is something about the combination of that amazing power of description and the way in which the large camera's monocular eye looking at the subject and the camera steadily mounted on a tripod, and the fact that it takes a little bit of time to make a large format photograph. I compose, I focus, I leave the camera, I get a film holder, I insert the film holder, I make sure the lens is closed. All of those sort of steps of making the photograph begins to contribute to the way in which the sitter starts to think about how this photograph is. And I think one of the things that this guy who sat for this photograph, this amazingly beautifully attired and genteel man, I think he had a sense that this will be one of the last formal photographs that he'll have made of himself. And there is in that idea something really remarkable. And the idea that there is a sense of permanence to the photograph that we might not otherwise ascribe to it. So thank you for your time and your interest in what I'm doing here on Camera Position. Drop me a note at jeff@jeffcurto.com. I'd love to hear from you and hear what you're doing out there in photography. And keep listening. And thanks again for listening to Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.